What happens when 17 passengers board a train that never arrives? When metal and steam simply cease to exist? Good evening, listeners of WZRD 730 AM. This is Elliot Graves, broadcasting live from Akron, Ohio. It's 11:47 p.m. on Thursday, May 19th, 1953. Outside our studio windows, a spring rain taps persistently against the glass, as if nature itself is sending us coded messages we've yet to decipher. You are tuned to The Midnight Signal, where we illuminate what others prefer, to leave in darkness. Tonight I find myself troubled by a peculiar document that arrived at our station just yesterday, a weathered leather portfolio containing telegraph transcripts, train schedules, and witness statements, all meticulously preserved for over a decade. The package arrived without a return address, bearing only a faded postmark from Moundsville, West Virginia. This reporter has learned through careful examination that the portfolio tells a story that defies rational explanation, a story of train 4311, which departed from Harlow Station in Moundsville on a crisp autumn morning in 1942 with 20 souls aboard, bound for Millerton Junction, just 18 miles down the line across the Ohio border, a journey that should have taken no more than 40 minutes. As I review the passenger manifest, one name stands out: E. Graves, a radio broadcaster like myself, listed as heading to Akron. The coincidence unsettles me, as if time itself is whispering my name. Yet train 4311 never arrived. No wreckage was ever discovered. No bodies recovered. Not a single scrap of metal or fabric. The train and its passengers simply ceased to exist somewhere between two small stations along the West Virginia-Ohio border. Before I continue with tonight's transmission, I must mention that our Midnight Observer Society is seeking 1,000 founding members to document phenomena that others refuse to acknowledge. The portfolio I hold tonight was preserved by someone who understood the importance of recording the inexplicable, someone who recognized that certain stories must not fade into obscurity. If you've witnessed something that defies explanation, something others refuse to believe, I urge you to write to us at WZRD 730 AM. Your account may connect to others, revealing patterns in what seems random. The truth requires witnesses, friends, and some truths can only be whispered after midnight. Dear listeners, as tonight's rain intensifies outside our studio, I feel the weight of the silence between my words. These pauses, these intervals of quiet, are when we truly listen, aren't they? Like the spaces between telegraph signals that form the meaning of a message. In this moment, I'm reminded that our Midnight Observer Society isn't merely a collection of curious minds. It's a community of witnesses, each of you preserving fragments of a larger truth. The members who've already joined us have shared accounts similar to the train incident I'm describing tonight. Moments when reality seems to bend, when time flows irregularly. Perhaps you've experienced such moments yourself. If so, your testimony matters. The Society awaits your correspondence at WZRD 730 AM. Let us return to Moundsville, West Virginia, November 17, 1942. America had been at war for nearly a year. Young men were being drafted daily, while factories rumbled day and night producing materials for the Allied forces overseas. The radio, waves buzzed with war news and rationing announcements, with families gathering around their sets each evening, holding collective breath for updates from the Pacific and European fronts. The border region between West Virginia and Ohio was no different. Small towns like Harlow, Millerton, and Gresham were connected by a single-track rail line that transported both passengers and materials for the war effort. The track had operated without incident since 1898, a reliable artery connecting rural communities to larger rail hubs. According to the schedule preserved in this portfolio, Train 4311 was a modest 3-car passenger train that departed Harlow Station in Moundsville at precisely 9:17 a.m. that Tuesday morning. The weather was reported as clear and cold, with light frost on the ground but excellent visibility. The conductor was Vernon Miller, a veteran railman with 27 years of experience. The engineer was Harold Farley with 15 years of service. The only other crew member was Peter Dunstan, a young porter who had taken the position after being declared unfit for military service due to a childhood bout with polio. Among the 17 passengers were a school teacher, 3 factory workers heading to their shift, an elderly couple visiting their daughter, a doctor returning from a house call, and several others whose names and destinations are carefully recorded in the manifest. One passenger particularly stands out, Helen Winters, who according to the manifest was traveling to her job at the Millerton Steel Works, one of many women filling roles traditionally reserved for men as the war effort reshaped the nation's workforce. Helen Winters' sister told investigators, "She faced jeers at the steel works but proved women could outwork anyone. She was proud to board that train for her shift. Like most trains of the era, 4311 maintained separate accommodations. The colored passengers rode in the rear half of the final car, as dictated by the shameful segregation laws still enforced throughout much of the nation. What makes this case particularly disturbing is a final telegraph message sent from Harlow Station at 9:42 a.m., approximately 25 minutes after train 4311's departure. The message, sent by Station Master William Pearson to Millerton Junction, reads simply, "Something is wrong with the time here. Train 4311 left 25 minutes ago, but the station clock still reads 9:17. Please advise." No response from Millerton was ever recorded, and train 4311 never arrived. The investigation into the disappearance of train 4311 began within hours of its failure to arrive at Millerton Junction. This portfolio contains the initial report filed by Sheriff Caleb Morgan, who was alerted at 10:30 a.m. when Station Master Robert Hudson at Millerton became concerned about the train's absence. Sheriff Morgan first suspected a mechanical failure or track damage, the most logical explanations for a delay. He dispatched 2 deputies to travel the 18-mile stretch of track between the stations by automobile, following the rural road that roughly paralleled the rail line. I'm looking at their report now. Deputy Franklin Grant and Deputy Thomas Weber departed Millerton in a police automobile at 10:45 a.m., traveling at a cautious speed and scanning the tracks visible from the road. They arrived at Harlow Station in Moundsville at 11:32 a.m., having seen nothing unusual along the entire route. No smoke, no disturbance to the rails, no sign of the missing train. The deputies found Station Master William Pearson in a state of obvious distress. According to their statement, Pearson appeared disoriented and confused about the time, repeatedly insisting that only 2 hours had passed since train 4311's departure, despite his own station clock and the deputies' timepieces confirming it had been just over 2 hours. "I'm telling you, fellas, something screwy is happening with the time," Pearson reportedly said. "That train pulled out at 9:17 on the nose, and I swear to you the clock froze right then and there. Didn't move a tick for near half an hour." Most disturbing was Pearson's claim that the clock in the station had been stuck at 9:17 for nearly 30 minutes after the train's departure, before suddenly jumping ahead. He showed the deputies his telegraph log containing the message about the time discrepancy that he had sent to Millerton. By noon, a more thorough search was organized. Railroad officials dispatched maintenance crews from both Harlow and Millerton to inspect every foot of track between the stations. Sheriff Morgan contacted neighboring counties for additional manpower, and by late afternoon, over 50 men were searching the area, including the wooded regions on either side of the tracks. The search continued for 3 days, expanding to cover a 5-mile radius around the tracks. Not a single piece of evidence was discovered. The tracks themselves were intact along the entire route, showing no signs of damage or derailment. No disturbed earth. No broken branches in the adjacent woods. No scattered belongings. Nothing to suggest that a train carrying 20 people had ever traveled that route. On the fourth day, November 21st, the search was officially scaled back, though intermittent efforts continued for weeks. The portfolio contains a telling memo from the Regional Director of Ohio Central Railroad, dated December 3, 1942, instructing station personnel to refrain from speculative discussion regarding Train 4311, and to direct all inquiries to the company's legal department. This portfolio also contains something quite remarkable. A personal journal belonging to Dr. Theodore Lambert, one of the few people who had been at Harlow Station when Train 4311 departed. Dr. Lambert, a physicist who had been teaching at Ohio State University before joining the war effort, had come to Moundsville to visit his sister. He missed the train that morning, arriving at the station just as it was pulling away. Something about his name strikes me as familiar, though I cannot quite place why. Perhaps I've read his scientific papers, or perhaps, but I digress. Let us continue with the evidence at hand. According to his journal entries, what initially caught Dr. Lambert's attention was not the train itself, but Station Master Pearson's peculiar behavior immediately following its departure. Dr. Lambert wrote, "Pearson stood transfixed, staring at the station clock as if witnessing something extraordinary. When I approached to inquire about the next train, he seemed not to hear me. His eyes remained fixed on the clock face, and I observed him checking his pocket watch repeatedly, a look of increasing alarm spreading across his features. When I finally gained his attention and asked what troubled him, he merely shook his head and said, 'The damn thing won't move.'" Dr. Lambert initially dismissed the incident, but his scientific curiosity was piqued when he learned of the train's disappearance later that day. He returned to the station to question Pearson further, and what he discovered led him to postpone his return to Columbus and remain in Moundsville for several weeks, conducting what he termed informal observations. The journal contains meticulously recorded interviews with Pearson and 3 other witnesses who had been present at Harlow Station that morning. All described similar anomalies related to time, watches that stopped momentarily, a strange quality, to the air that one witness described as thick, like moving through water, and a unanimous feeling that the train's departure had been somehow stretched, taking longer than it should have. One witness, a retired school teacher named Martha Whitley, told Lambert, "I've seen that train leave every Tuesday morning for 15 years, young man. It always takes exactly 43 seconds to clear the platform. But that morning, hot dog. It seemed to crawl like molasses in January. Must have taken 3 minutes at least." Most compelling is Dr. Lambert's own experiment. On November 25th, he positioned himself at the exact spot where Pearson had stood when watching Train 4311 depart. He brought 3 timepieces, a pocket watch, a wristwatch, and a small portable clock. At precisely 9:17 a.m., the same time Train 4311 had departed a week earlier, all 3 timepieces stopped simultaneously for exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds, before resuming as if nothing had happened. Dr. Lambert repeated this experiment for 5 consecutive days. The anomaly occurred only once more, on November 28th, when the timepieces stopped for 2 minutes and 17 seconds. His final entry, dated December 7, 1942, reads, "I can no longer dismiss this as instrument failure or coincidence. Something in this location is affecting the flow of time itself, albeit unpredictably. My hypothesis, though it challenges everything I understand about physics, is that Train 4311 encountered a severe temporal distortion, a ripple or pocket in time, that removed it from our perceivable timeline. Whether the train and its passengers continue to exist in some alternate temporal state, or were destroyed by the forces involved, I cannot determine with current scientific knowledge. I leave for Washington tomorrow to present my findings to colleagues at the Bureau. This matter extends beyond missing persons. It may represent a fundamental discovery about the nature of reality itself. Dr. Lambert never arrived in Washington. According to a newspaper clipping included in the portfolio, his automobile was found abandoned along Route 40, halfway between Columbus and Wheeling. Dr. Lambert himself was never seen again. Time is not merely a measurement, but a dimension we move through like fish through water, never noticing the medium that sustains us until something disturbs its flow. I have before me now a remarkable document, a transcript of interviews conducted by federal investigators with the families of passengers from train 4311. These interviews, marked confidential and dated January 1943, reveal patterns that the official investigation apparently overlooked or deliberately suppressed. 7 different families reported that in the weeks before the train's disappearance, their loved ones described identical dreams of standing in a field while a train passed, without sound. 4 passengers had specifically mentioned feeling anxious about their upcoming journey, despite having traveled the same route many times before. Most striking is the account from Margaret Wilson, wife of passenger Thomas Wilson, who stated that her husband's pocket watch had stopped at precisely 9:17 a.m. 3 days in a row before the incident. Allow me to tell you more about Thomas Wilson. A veteran of the Great War, he had returned to West Virginia in 1919 with a slight limp and recurring nightmares, but otherwise intact. He found work as a machinist at the Westinghouse plant in Millerton, married his sweetheart Margaret in 1921, and by all accounts lived a quiet, respectable life. His war experience left him with a peculiar relationship to time. He was known for his punctuality, carrying a pocket watch that he checked obsessively. Tom couldn't abide being late, Margaret told investigators. Said he'd seen enough men die because someone's watch was off by a minute. But that week before he vanished, he kept saying his watch was acting screwy, stopping dead at 9:17 every morning, then starting up again like nothing happened. Time's trying to tell me something, Maggie, he said the night before. Those were nearly his last words to me. Another passenger, Eleanor Simmons, was a school teacher traveling to Millerton for a teaching conference. Her sister Ruth provided investigators with Eleanor's diary, which contained an entry from the night before the journey. Had that strange dream again, standing in Miller's Field watching a train pass. No sound at all, like a moving picture with no accompaniment. The faces in the windows seem to be calling out, but I can't hear them. I count 17 windows, and in each one, a different face. And then I realize I'm looking at myself in one of those windows. What a case of the willies. But Miss Peterson says the conference will be just keen. So off I go tomorrow despite these silly dreams. Among the passengers, one name stands out. E. Graves, a radio broadcaster like myself, listed as heading to Akron. The coincidence unsettles me, as if time itself is whispering my name. His wife's testimony about his recurring nightmares of voices on the air that no one else could hear sends a chill down my spine. The federal investigation was officially closed in February 1943, with the final report attributing the disappearance to unexplained derailment in an inaccessible location, with subsequent removal of evidence by unknown parties. This explanation satisfied neither the families nor local officials, but with the nation's attention focused on the war effort, the case of Train 4311 gradually faded from public consciousness. Yet some continued to search for answers. Among the documents in this portfolio is a series of letters exchanged between Sheriff Morgan and a Dr. Elias Weiss of the Department of War's Scientific Research Division. In these increasingly urgent communications, Sheriff Morgan describes unusual phenomena that continued to occur along the train route for months after the disappearance. The livestock refused to cross that stretch of land, Morgan wrote in April 1943. Farmers report their horses become agitated and uncontrollable within half a mile of the tracks. 3 separate hunting dogs have gone missing in the woods adjacent to mile marker 27, precisely where we calculate the train would have been at 9:42 that morning. Dr. Weiss's responses are measured and scientific, but reveal growing interest. By July 1943, he had dispatched a small team to Moundsville, ostensibly to conduct geological surveys along the rail line. Their equipment, as described in Morgan's letters, included devices for measuring magnetic fields, atmospheric pressure, and radiation, unusual tools for geologists. The team remained for 3 weeks, focusing their attention on a quarter-mile stretch of track near mile marker 27, an area of dense woodland with a small clearing beside the tracks. According to Morgan, they established a perimeter and restricted local access, working primarily at night. One night in late July, Morgan was called to the site after a local farmer reported seeing lights like flares, but green in color, emanating from the woods. Upon arrival, Morgan found the research team in a state of excitement, loading equipment hastily into government vehicles. Dr. Weiss refused to explain what they had discovered, stating only that their findings were significant and required immediate attention from higher authorities. The next day, the entire team was gone. 2 weeks later, Morgan received a letter on Department of War letterhead, informing him that the investigation into Train 4311 was now a matter of national security, and that he was to cease all inquiries and surrender any remaining evidence. Morgan did neither. Instead, he continued his own investigation quietly, collecting witness statements and documenting anomalies. This portfolio appears to be the culmination of his decade-long search for the truth. What's particularly notable is how the disappearance affected the community of Moundsville. The portfolio contains newspaper clippings documenting the economic impact on the area. The rail line between Harlow and Millerton was closed for 3 months following the incident, ostensibly for safety inspections, cutting off vital transportation for workers and goods. Businesses in both towns suffered. The Harlow Tribune reported in March 1943 that 6 local businesses had closed permanently, unable to recover from the interruption. Time gives form to our memories, as stone gives form to sculpture. Yet when time itself becomes malleable, our very understanding of existence must be reshaped. More telling are the personal accounts from local residents. A collection of letters Morgan gathered reveals how deeply the incident scarred the community. Attendance at churches spiked in the weeks following the disappearance, with many residents seeking spiritual comfort in the face of inexplicable events. School enrollment in both towns declined as families relocated, unwilling to live near what some began calling the ghost tracks. One resident, Henry Blackwood, a farmer whose property bordered the rail line near mile marker 27, wrote to Morgan in 1948, "Sheriff, I know you're still looking into that train business, and I reckon I ought to tell you what happened last week. My oldest boy and I were checking fences along the back property, the part that runs alongside them tracks. It was just before sundown, and the weather was clear as a bell. We both heard it plain as day, a train whistle but sort of stretched out, like somebody was playing a record too slow. Wasn't no train scheduled, and we ain't had a regular passenger service through here since '46. My boy said that, 'Daddy, look, there,' and I swear on my mother's Bible we saw something like heat waves above the tracks, shimmering in the shape of a train. Lasted maybe 10 seconds, then gone. My land ain't for sale, Sheriff. This is Blackwood soil going back 3 generations. But I won't work that back section no more, and neither will my boys." The rail whistle speaks across decades, a plaintive cry from travelers caught between moments. Like memories that refuse to fade, they echo in the present without truly belonging to it. Perhaps the most unsettling items in this collection are the photographs. There are 17 of them, taken at various points along the rail line between 1943 and 1949. Most show nothing remarkable: empty tracks, dense woods, the occasional maintenance worker. But 3 of the photographs contain what Morgan described in his notes as temporal echoes. I'm looking at one now dated June 17, 1944. It shows the clearing near mile marker 27, taken at dawn. At first glance, there's nothing unusual, just tracks cutting through woodland with early morning mist hovering above the ground. But when examined closely, particularly with the magnifying glass Morgan thoughtfully included, something extraordinary becomes visible within the mist. The ghostly, translucent outline of what appears to be a train car. Not solid, not complete, but unmistakably the silhouette of a passenger car, hovering several feet above the tracks. The second photograph, taken in November 1947, exactly 5 years after the disappearance, shows a similar phenomenon, but with what appears to be a human figure standing beside the tracks. The figure is blurred as if in motion, but the posture suggests someone in a railroad uniform, possibly checking the track ahead. The third photograph is the most disturbing. Taken at night in October 1949, it shows a distinct light moving above the tracks, not the headlamp of a train, but a smaller, concentrated glow that Morgan described as similar to a conductor's lantern, sweeping back and forth as if searching for something in the darkness. These photographs, combined with witness statements collected by Morgan over the years, suggest something that conventional science struggles to explain. That train 4311 didn't crash or derail in the conventional sense, but perhaps continues to exist in some altered state, occasionally intersecting with our reality, like a radio frequency that briefly cuts through static before fading again. One witness account from 1948 describes hearing a train whistle at precisely 9:42 a.m. while walking near mile marker 27, despite no train being scheduled or observed. Another report from 1951 comes from a 12-year-old boy who claimed to have seen a train made of fog while hunting with his father. The most recent statement, dated just last year, is from a railroad maintenance worker who swears he heard voices calling from nowhere while replacing ties along that same stretch of track. Each incident, each sighting, each temporal anomaly occurred exactly 9 years, 5 months, and 25 days after the train's disappearance, a pattern that Sheriff Morgan had begun to recognize before his own disappearance in December of last year. Yes, listeners, Caleb Morgan, the man who compiled this remarkable portfolio of evidence, vanished while conducting what his notes describe as his final survey of the area. His automobile was found parked near mile marker 27, his camera on the passenger seat, loaded with film but undeveloped. The final section of this portfolio contains what may be the key to understanding the fate of train 4311 and its passengers, information that connects this incident to other phenomena, and potentially to government experiments conducted during the early years of the war. Before his disappearance, Sheriff Morgan had begun corresponding with a former military scientist named Dr. Richard Gannon, who had worked on classified projects related to radar technology in 1941 and 1942. Dr. Gannon, after reading a small newspaper article about the 10th anniversary of the train's disappearance, reached out to Morgan with information that he claimed had haunted him for a decade. According to Gannon's letters, in early 1942, a specialized research facility was established in an underground bunker approximately 12 miles from the Moundsville rail line. The facility's purpose was ostensibly to develop advanced radar systems for detecting enemy aircraft, but Gannon suggests the actual research ventured into more theoretical territory, specifically attempts to manipulate electromagnetic fields to create what he termed detection-resistant corridors for military transport. In layman's terms, they were attempting early experiments in what we might call invisibility technology. Gannon describes an incident in October 1942, just 1 month before train 4311's disappearance, when an experiment produced unexpected results. Instead of merely bending light waves around an object, the device they were testing created what Gannon described as a temporal displacement field that caused a test vehicle to vanish for approximately 3 minutes before reappearing 100 yards from its original position. The scientists were both alarmed and excited by this development, recognizing its potential military applications while concerned about the unpredictable nature of the effect. According to Gannon, they modified the device to increase its power and range, scheduling a larger test for mid-November. The test was set for November 17, 1942, at precisely 9:30 a.m., 13 minutes after train 4311 departed Harlow Station. Exactly, when Station Master Pearson noticed the station clock frozen at 9:17. What's particularly chilling is Gannon's revelation that this work ran parallel to the better-known Manhattan Project. While scientists at Los Alamos were splitting atoms to create destructive energy, this team was splitting something perhaps even more fundamental: the fabric of time itself. Gannon hinted that their facility operated under similar secrecy protocols as the early nuclear test sites, with many researchers not fully understanding the ultimate application of their work. The desert wasn't the only place where we tempted fate, Gannon wrote. While they were harnessing the atom in New Mexico, we were trying to harness time in West Virginia. Both teams played with forces we barely understood, and both created weapons that should never have been made. Gannon states that the test produced readings far beyond anything they had anticipated, with electromagnetic disturbances detected up to 15 miles from the facility. The equipment experienced a power surge and partially melted. Most concerning, the carefully positioned observation cameras captured a momentary distortion in the atmosphere above the test site, a rippling effect that one scientist described as the air folding in on itself. It wasn't until the following day that they learned of the missing train. Gannon claims that senior military officials immediately suspected a connection, but ordered absolute secrecy. The research project was abruptly terminated. The underground facility was sealed, and all personnel were reassigned to different projects across the country, after signing additional non-disclosure agreements with severe penalties. Gannon kept silent for a decade, but the weight of 20 missing souls eventually compelled him to reach out to Morgan. His final letter in this collection, dated September 1952, expresses his intention to travel to Moundsville to show Morgan the exact location of the former facility. There is no record that he ever arrived. Sheriff Morgan's notes indicate that he attempted to contact Gannon several times in October and November without success, before deciding to conduct his final survey in December, after which Morgan himself vanished. What are we to make of this extraordinary connection? Did a classified military experiment accidentally create a temporal disturbance that removed train 4311 from our reality? The coincidence of timing seems too precise to dismiss, but there's another piece to this puzzle, one that suggests the incident may not have been entirely accidental. Among the final documents in the portfolio is a partial transcript of a closed congressional hearing dated March 1943. Most of the text is redacted, but several readable passages stand out with disturbing clarity. One exchange between an unnamed military official and a congressman includes this statement: "The Moundsville anomaly, while regrettable, provided invaluable data that could not have been obtained through conventional testing methods. The temporal displacement effect far exceeded our theoretical models, and analysis of the residual electromagnetic signature has already led to significant advancements in the project." Another passage refers to 17 civilian observers and 3 railroad personnel as unavoidable collateral in a matter of national security. The coldness of this characterization, reducing 20 missing Americans to mere collateral damage, is chilling. Most alarming is a brief discussion of what they termed echo phenomena, the very same temporal echoes that Sheriff Morgan documented in his photographs. Far from being surprised by these manifestations, the military officials seem to have expected them, with one noting that periodic reintegration events were predicted by the theoretical model, though complete reconstitution remains beyond current technological capabilities. In other words, they knew the train might periodically partially reappear, and they made no effort to warn local authorities or to establish any means of rescuing those trapped in whatever temporal limbo the experiment had created. This portfolio contains one final document that I find particularly moving. A personal letter written by Mary Dunstan, mother of Peter Dunstan, the young porter aboard train 43111. Dated November 17th, 1952, the 10th anniversary of the disappearance. The letter is addressed simply to "My son, wherever you may be." In it, she describes a recurring dream that began in 1947 and has visited her on the 17th of every month since. In this dream, she sees her son standing in the doorway of a train car, his uniform pristine, his face unaged. He calls to her, but his voice makes no sound. Behind him, the other passengers sit motionless, as if frozen in time. Through the windows, there is neither daylight nor darkness, but a strange, shifting gray. Then, always, her son looks at his pocket watch, the one his father gave him, and shows her the face. The hands point to 9:17, but they're moving backward. Mary Dunstan died peacefully in her sleep last month, on April 17, 1953. According to her sister, who sent this letter to Sheriff Morgan shortly before his own disappearance, Mary's final words were, "I think I know where Peter is now. Time isn't a line, it's a circle. I'll find him at the beginning." Listeners, as I was preparing for tonight's broadcast, I received a telephone call from a man who identified himself only as a former employee of the Ohio Central Railroad. He refused to provide his name, but what he shared adds yet another layer to this mystery. According to this anonymous source, Train 4311 had been used for a special government transport just 2 weeks before its disappearance. He claims to have personally observed military personnel loading sealed crates into the baggage car late at night when the station was closed to the public. The crates were marked with unfamiliar symbols and handled with extreme caution. Furthermore, he states that after the train's disappearance, federal agents confiscated the maintenance records for that specific train and removed all documentation of this special transport from railroad files. Most significantly, he claims that among the 17 passengers on that fateful November morning were 2 men who boarded at the last minute, showing credentials that the station master recognized as military intelligence. If true, this suggests that the government may have had more direct involvement than even Dr. Gannon realized. Was Train 4311 not just an accidental victim of a nearby experiment, but perhaps the intended target? Were those sealed crates containing equipment related to the temporal research described in Gannon's letters? Excuse me, listeners. It appears we have a call coming through to the studio. This is Elliot Graves of WZRD 730 AM. Hello? I'm afraid your connection is quite poor. Could you please identify yourself?
917. It's always 917. Help us. The experiment never ended. We're still. Time loops back on itself. Harlow Station, mile marker 27, November 17th.
Listeners, I'm not personally certain what just occurred. The voice on that call was barely discernible through the static, yet what little came through clearly relates to our discussion of Train 4311. Most disturbing is that our studio line has been experiencing technical difficulties all day. The engineers informed me before the broadcast that incoming calls were impossible. The line was to be used for outgoing calls only until repairs could be completed tomorrow. Yet someone, or something, just contacted our studio. I've just checked the documentation again. The portfolio contains a passenger manifest for Train 4311. Among the names listed is an E. Graves, a name I share, though surely a coincidence. The passenger's destination is listed as Akron, and his occupation is recorded as radio broadcaster. The name E. Graves on the manifest, now undeniable after haunting me since the first page, chills me to the core. Listeners, I must confess that when I first examined this manifest earlier today, this name was not present. I reviewed the document thoroughly, multiple times. This name, my name, was not there. Something has changed. Something is happening even as we speak. I can see something moving outside the studio window now. A shadow that seems to shimmer like heat waves over pavement. And there's a sound, like a train whistle, but stretched and distorted, as if emanating from a great distance or perhaps from another time altogether.
Time to come home, Elliot.
Time, listeners. Time is not the straight line we perceive it to be. What happened to train 4311 and its passengers, what continues to happen to them, suggests that under certain conditions, the neat progression of moments we experience can fold, loop, or fracture entirely. Sheriff Morgan understood this. Dr. Lambert understood this. And perhaps, in her own way, Mary Dunstan understood it best of all. The evidence compiled in this remarkable portfolio points to a truth more unsettling than a simple disappearance. Train 4311 may exist still, caught in a moment that repeats, endlessly, 9:17 to 9:42 over and over, occasionally brushing against our reality just enough for us to glimpse its ghostly presence. A train trapped in time, passengers who haven't aged a day since 1942. A journey that never ends because it never truly progresses. As for the role our government played in this tragedy, I leave that judgment to you, my listeners. In this era of McCarthy's witch hunts and Cold War secrets, the government's silence on Moundsville feels all the more sinister. But remember this, some experiments have consequences their creators never imagined, and some secrets are buried not because they're valuable, but because they're shameful. I urge you to join our Midnight Observer Society. Write to us at WZRD 730 AM. Help us document and preserve these stories that exist at the edges of understanding. For if we forget them, who will remember those caught in time's distortions? The rain has stopped outside our studio now. The air feels unusually still. And my pocket watch, well, it seems to be running normally again. This is Elliot Graves, wishing you safe passage through the night until our next signal reaches you through the darkness.